Hello everyone. Been out here working on stripping this deck lid for right at 3 hours now. I used a little DeWalt angle grinder and that I think I call it a polycarbonate abrasive wheel. I get those from Harbor Freight. They're about, I think, $8 or $9 a piece. They make quick business of getting several layers of paint off here because the trunk lid had 2 layers of the tawny gold metallic on there, and then there was a bunch of that some yellow 2K primer, and then I had that silvery blue metallic base coat on there, and then quite a bit of that cheap, it looked like Audubon clear coat on top of it. But what I wanted to show you is even though I don't know if you can see it much in this video, but those don't look bad. You know, that is the kind of grinder marks that polycarbonate wheel puts if you hold it nice and flat. There are some places where you just kind of hold it up on the edge a little bit, and as you can see out there, it leaves a slight grinder mark in it. So I went back all over it with the 80 grit on a DA, and you can see here I've sanded this pretty good, and I've got, I'd say, 99% of that little grinder mark out of there. Now I'm gonna move over here where I haven't sanded it much. I'm hoping the camera picks it up good. Try to get the right angle. Can you see the slight little discoloration marks? Those are little divots. They're actually grinder marks that polycarbonate wheel will put in there. So you can imagine what a 36 grit or a 50 grit wheel does. You know, yes, primer is made to fill imperfections, but primer does shrink. You know, they make some primers say they don't shrink. My honest opinion is all of them will shrink some. Your cheaper primers are worse than others, so you know, you get what you pay for. That's why it's a good idea not to bury your coats up there, you know, real fast and heavy. Don't put a real heavy coat and then not wait very long and then put another heavy coat, because every time you're doing that, the top's not having time to flash off and get all those solvents out of there, and you hammer another coat on top of there. Well, if you do that 3 or 4 coats and you got a cheap primer like this Roberto was that I have, it's cracking up and I can't get any response from them about anything. They're telling me to call them, but I don't really have much time to call them and talk them on the phone. I may have to do it anyway. But to get to my point about this video, you know, just always make sure that you anywhere you can DA the metal with 80 grit. Your body filler will stick to 80 grit scratches. So in my opinion, it's better to do that than to take a 50 grit or, you know, a 36 grit. I know back 30 years ago, that's what they taught us, take a 36 grit to these old cars. Said the metal's thick enough you can handle it, but when they've been worked on, you know, God knows how many times, you know, you don't know how much metal's taken away. So in my opinion, 80 grit on the bare metal is good. Just make sure you get back on it quick and put your body filler to it, because if you wait too long, in my experience, it doesn't tend to adhere well. So anyway, I'll show you the rest of this up here. That is where I have not DA'd this at all yet. I got the majority of the paint off. You know, it's in pretty good shape, this deck lid. The only thing I've really found is there's a few dings right across here, and got a fly there. And, there was a couple of places where there was a small dent. I think it was right there, and it had a big speck of rust in it. There were several specks of rust out here. I guess maybe over the years somebody set something on top of the trunk lid and chipped the paint off, but some of them had a bunch of that red cellulose lacquer type primer putty filler put in it, and others were just buried up in that yellow 2K primer that was put on here. But the bad thing is, you know, when you find a chip in the paint and it goes all the way to the metal, you really, I can't stress enough, you just need to go ahead and DA it down to the bare metal with 80 grit, and then keep sanding until you get all of the rust looking spot you can out of there. I'm trying to see if I can get the camera to catch it. Right there is where that rust speck was. that is looking pretty good, and I will even try to get it better than that. Because, in my opinion, if you can get all that metal looking the silvery blue like it needs to be, then every bit of that rust is gone, and you don't have to worry about it. Because, like I've said before, rust to a car is like cancer is to our body. If you don't get it all out, it's not a matter of if it'll come back, it's a matter of when it will come back. So, in places like that, there was places where they'd just buried the rock chips up with paint or primer. Well, I noticed in between the layers of paint, like I was grinding that blue off there with that polycarbonate disc, and I get through there and I see a little yellow spot and it was sticking up, and I was like, what is that? And I grind it a little further and the yellow spot goes away, and I go down and I find out, well, there was that tawny gold metallic under there. And then I went through that and I get down, and underneath it there was rust, and I grind that all away. So that tells me that rust that's been under here for God knows how many years finally is swelling and growing. Even though it's trapped underneath there, it's still growing, and that's what caused the paint to kind of bubble up and make a high spot. That's why when I was grinding it, I got the paint off there, and then all of a sudden that yellow spot shows up through everything else. It just looks like there's a yellow spot on top of that metallic blue type paint that was about the same color as what's on that Nissan out there. But so I'm bad about rambling on, but the key thing is just all the rust you can get off there, get it off, every bit of it you can. I know it's a lot of work and it's a pain in the butt, but if you're wanting a good job done, get it off of there. And I got to go back over this. As I was talking about, you could see the slight discolorations. It almost looks like modeling in a metallic paint job. But that's some slight little deviations that polycarbonate will put in there. And you can keep that same piece of 80 grit on there, but after a while the 80 grit wears out and it's not really cutting the metal off. The 80 grit does shave a little bit of the metal off of there. So if you keep a fresh piece on there, like so far just this half of the deck lid, I've done a strip all the way up to the rear glass there, and from the very bottom up to here, and from the side over to here, and about 2/3 of the way up. And I've used 3 pieces of 80 grit, and the 3rd piece is already wore out. So keep a fresh piece on there, that way it'll cut off a little bit off the top of that metal and get some of them grinder marks out of there. And that way you got less shrinkage. So, and whenever you do put your primer on, like I said, be sure and give it plenty of flash time between coats so that all the solvents get out. That way it's not going to shrink up later on you, because as them solvents are evaporating, you're either going to get solvent pops or blisters. Or if you're lucky enough not to have that, it just shrinks down and it shows all these divots and deviations and dents, and imperfections in your bodywork. So let each coat flash off good, and then the longer you can let this primer dry before you block it, the better, because it's giving it time to cure and all the solvents coming out of it. So, if you got time and it's your own personal project, if you're going to wait 3 weeks or a month, that's great. That primer's got plenty of time to cure, and it's going to dry good. And, and if you're working on it in the wintertime and your shop isn't, heated, then, you need even longer time than that, because if your shop is staying even 50 degrees at nighttime, the chemicals in the primer and the paint aren't going to do what they need to do. It has to be, some materials are 60 degrees, some of them say 65 degrees. But I would not go below 60 for sure, because it will not cross-link, like they say, and that's where the chemicals are actually gripping together. You can imagine taking your fingers on both hands and kind of gripping them together to make a double fist. That's what the chemicals are doing. When they're first put together, it's like your fingers are barely together and they're sliding together more and more and more. And then when you grip them tight, that's how it bonds and makes everything stick better. And also, everything's completely dry. And again, to go back and explain that, how my fingers are sliding together, getting closer and closer, and then finally grips and both hands are gripped together tightly as a fist. That's why you see shrinkage over time, because the chemicals are coming out of there and they're doing their thing, and it shrinks and it's bonding to the surface. So anyway, we're at 10 minutes now, so hopefully I helped you out here. If you got any questions, ask away, leave comments, and Like the channel and subscribe and share to your friends. Appreciate it.